Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this press conference. We've almost reached the halfway point of the legislative session, and we thought it'd be a good idea to do a check-in with the press and with the public on how the status of Idaho's budget deficits are going and how the Idaho's legislature is meeting that challenge. You may remember that a month ago we held a press conference after the governor's State of the State address, and at that time we promised to give you straight talk about what's happening in this building. We're going to make another installment on that promise here today. You were told by the majority party at the beginning of this session that the state of Idaho has a spending problem. That was wrong, untrue. The unrefuted evidence shows that the state of Idaho does not have a spending problem. Over the last 20 years, and considering inflation and population growth, our spending has been flat. The unrefuted evidence shows that the state of Idaho has a revenue problem. How could that be? Just 10 months ago, at the end of last session, you were told by the majority party that we had a $430 million surplus. But coming into this session, you were told that for fiscal year 2027, the state of Idaho was facing a $555 million deficit that could grow as high as $1 billion. Again, how can that be? Where did the money go? Idaho went from historic surpluses to historic deficits because of bad fiscal decision making. Over the last 5 years, the Idaho legislature cut income tax revenue by $4 billion. Last year alone, it cut taxes by $450 million. Our Republican colleagues also created a voucher program sending $50 million to private schools and religious schools with no accountability for how that money is spent. Each year moving forward, we have $1.1 billion fewer dollars to spend on our public schools, our universities, our roads, our courts, our law enforcement, and our prisons. That is a revenue problem, not a spending problem. The Idaho legislature blew it. It voluntarily reduced revenue year after year for 5 years. And who is going to pay the price for that bad fiscal policy? You will, your school district, your kid's classroom, your neighbor who's going to lose their health insurance. You may also remember that only 1 month ago, you were told by the majority party that cutting these budgets would be easy. It wouldn't be a problem. We told you then that they were wrong, that balancing these budgets by simply cutting was going to inflict real harm on everyday Idahoans. And it pains us to say that we were right. And while much of the damage of these cuts will be felt in the months and years to come, we already have tangible evidence that Idaho families are being harmed by what's happening in this building. From news headlines just in the last few days, the tax commission is saying they won't be able to get returns out timely. Idaho's prison costs could surge due to delays in parole hearings. Water quality monitoring will be reduced. Mental health services have already been cut, thereby requiring law enforcement to step in when there's a mental health crisis, thereby filling our jails and our communities. These are real impacts to Idaho families. We also know our public schools and our universities are going to suffer. Idahoans are going to lose their health care. Idahoans are going to lose their jobs. Legislators are starting to hear about this in grocery stores and restaurants in their home districts. I know I am. Layoffs are already taking place at Idaho State University. The last time we faced coffers this empty was during the Great Recession in 2009. But that was a national crisis. We did this to ourselves. So why is the majority party telling you it's not a big deal? Because if they acknowledge it is a big deal, they have to acknowledge something bad is about to happen. And if they acknowledge something bad is about to happen, they have to acknowledge their role in it. And if they admit their role in it, they have to admit they screwed up. They have to admit that $4 billion in income tax cuts over the last 5 years was a mistake, that a $450 million tax cut last year was just a bad idea. And the $50 million in the voucher program, well, that was just bad policy. And they don't want to do that. Well, we think you deserve better, and Idaho can do better. The solution really is not that complicated. Democrats have a plan that will get us through this budget crisis and save Idaho families from the pain that they're about to feel. And it starts with using a third of the rainy day funds. That's $1.6 billion in rainy day funds. Using one third of it is about $533 million. It's taxpayer money. Let the people use it. And now, let me turn some time over to the rest of the caucus, and they'll share with you some of our other solutions. This is our straight talk. Representative Ilana Rubel.
Thank you very much. Senator Ruckty is spot on with the self-created nature of the crisis we're facing and how completely unnecessary it is that we got here and that we remain here. The majority party will tell you that we have no choice at this point, that we are broke, we're in a deficit, and the only choice we have is to make excruciatingly deep cuts to everything, to care for the disabled, to public schools, to universities, to road and water projects. But it is simply not true. There is, as you can see here, a better way. In fact, there are a number of better ways. The cuts are certainly not the best way. They are the worst way to approach the situation that we're in. And our caucus has been working on drafting legislation to resolve this crisis in responsible ways that will restore quality of life for the people of Idaho and maintain the vital services that they depend on. And some of my colleagues will talk about those bills, but I'm going to talk about a few of the options very briefly. We can address the loss of revenue. We can get rid of the voucher bill. We can put these tax cuts on hold. Specifically, a bill that I'm working on right now would restore the child tax credit, because one of the things you don't hear much about is that big, quote, tax cut they gave last year actually raised taxes on most families earning below the median level in Idaho, because they paid for it by terminating the child tax credit that low-income and working families rely on. We have legislation that would restore the child tax credit in a revenue-neutral way, largely by eradicating vouchers. So we can actually help the working families of Idaho by no longer sending $5,000 private school tuition checks out to the wealthiest among us. And also an infinitesimally a small increase in House Bill 40 in the income tax rate that we could not afford from last year. There are simple and obvious solutions to this crisis that we are simply not being allowed to talk about and not being allowed to vote on. And we are being presented only with the worst possible option of these deep, deep cuts that the governor's own staff acknowledges will cause long-term structural damage to the state. This is a terrible path for us to be going down. It's a completely unnecessary path to be going down. And I assure you, if we were controlling the policy in this building, it is not the path that we would be going down. And we want to tell you more about some of the solutions that we would be pursuing if we were permitted airtime in committees and the opportunity to push forward these policy solutions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Representative Birch.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. You know, Senator Ruckty mentioned the rainy day fund. Well, when you ask about why are we not using the rainy day fund, they say because the economy is great. Idaho's doing great. So it's a very simple question. If Idaho's economy is so great, why are we cutting budgets? And you know, we can talk about it, you know, being irresponsible, but there's another explanation too, potentially, that it's deliberate. And so when House Bill 40, the bill that took $2.5 billion out of state revenue for the next 10 years, this is how the bill was introduced by the sponsor of the bill. The only way to get the state to stop spending money is to give it back to the people. That's the exact same thing as saying the only way to stop the state from doing its job is to cut its funding, no matter who gets hurt. And we've heard some of the ways. In fact, you know, what we don't need is the ghost of Lizzie Borden, being channeled by the JFAC committee behind me here. So we have a better way to deal with a situation like this when money is deliberately taken out of revenue. And so one of the bills that I proposed was a pause on House Bill 40. You know, we don't know what the future is going to bring. We had That we've done these tax cuts without any assessment of what the needs of the state are. The DOJ committee met all summer without ever asking a question of what is the need to make sure the state can deliver what voters expect. It was just simply cut, cut, cut. Well, now we know that we're running deficits. Now we know that what the conformity bill looks like and how much money that's going to take out of state revenue, and we don't know still what may come around the corner. So what a smart, prudent, conservative person would do is give themselves the options to prepare for the future. And right now, there are two ways you prepare for a budget crisis, because that's what we're in if we're cutting budgets. One is cost, but the other is revenue. That second throttle doesn't exist right now in this building. But there's a way to do that. So we proposed a bill to put a pause on House Bill 40 next year. And if economic conditions are fine a year from now, great, repeal that and continue along the way we are. But if not, it gives the state an option to have another $250 million in revenue, just for at least 1 year, to close the gaps, to make sure services are provided. And I tried to get that bill introduced in the House Rev and Tax Committee. I'm on that committee. Was flat out refused. I mean, we can introduce 20 anti-trans bills, bathroom bills, flag bills. They get introduced like clockwork. But here was an effort to just give legislators an opportunity to consider another way to deal with fiscal crisis, and they refused to do it. So yes, I think there's clearly irresponsibility in how the state's finances have been managed, but there's also a problem with some actions that look very deliberate to put us in this situation to simply cut government. And next person, I believe John.
I don't think we have a fiscal crisis if we address the problem and don't take actions that create the fiscal crisis. But that's what's happened. The conformity bill is an excellent example. $155 million was the estimate, but two of the sponsors have said that just is for the individual tax cuts. It's not, they don't include the business, which is research and experimentation, which is probably about another 100 million. If you look at the Associated Taxpayers estimate, was 200 to 250. You can look even at the Freedom Foundation. The Freedom Foundation's analysis of the bill says that tens and tens of millions of dollars are going to be saved by business. It's a big hit, and it's a manufactured hit. It's not a hit on the budget that was just happened. They know it's a hit. I know it's a hit. We know it's a hit. The question, what could have happened is we could have just taken care of the tips, the overtime, and we could have given $50 to seniors for the grocery tax and essentially grocery tax credit, and essentially repealed the grocery tax credit for seniors. Why seniors? Because the deductions don't help most of our seniors, because our seniors aren't paying tax on Social Security. And our seniors also a senior couple gets a $30,000 exemption. So when you add those together, your IRA is probably going to be exempt and your Social Security is exempt, so a deduction doesn't do you any good. So it would have been better to just say $50 on the grocery tax and save, and then seniors essentially would, per person, seniors would essentially had a repeal of the grocery tax. There were things we could do on that. And now there is a solution. And that solution is the rainy day fund. That's what it's for. That's why we've been paying so many taxes the last few years, and we put them in this rainy day fund, and it sits in the government's coffers. That money could be used for the looming problem next year. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest challenges that face Idahoans homeowners today goes back to 2016, when our Republican legislature voted unanimously to stop the indexing of the homeowners exemption. They capped it at $125,000. Had we continued with that exemption, we would be looking at about a $225,000 exemption right now. As it is, homeowners are facing an increasing burden of unsustainable share of the tax load. We have corporations out there that are paying less in taxes on their property than your average hardworking homeowner is. So I would suggest that we go back to the indexing and try and get it back so that the average worker can save a little bit more money on what they've worked really hard to obtain, which is that American dream, and to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've been here a while, and I guess I just want to take a moment to really connect all the facts and figures and all the numbers and all the philosophies back to people. And that everything that is happening right now with our budget situation, with the revenue shortfalls, is impacting people. And I want to remind folks, it was just 1 week ago that we hosted a forum for people to come and talk about how Medicaid is impacting their lives and saving their lives. Because behind me in this room, I asked the committee chairs to please offer and provide an opportunity for people to give testimony before they made all these cuts. And there was precedent to do it. In the Great Recession, this committee opened its doors for the first time to the public to hear from them personally how the cuts would impact their lives. Unfortunately, we're not doing that this time. And instead, my phone, your phones, our emails, I get stopped in the grocery store, just like Senator Ruckty said, about the things that are problematic in their lives. And it is tiring to the core what we are doing to people. Last week, 600 people showed up in the State House in the Lincoln Auditorium and 3 overflow rooms to tell their stories of just how Medicaid had impacted their lives. It was moving. A couple hundred people testified. There wasn't even enough time in 4 hours to hear from everybody. But one of the stories that's most moving to me was a woman in her elderly life, in her 70s, maybe 80, who walked up to the podium with a caregiver and told the story through her caregiver of how the world had given up on her. She couldn't walk. And she got Medicaid services, she got support that she needed, and she's living as independently as she can. And as the caregiver told her story, the woman broke down in tears. There wasn't a dry eye in the house because we know we shouldn't be giving up on people. And that's the government's role. We choose as taxpayers to put our money toward the programs and services that make our lives better. And I'm glad that we didn't give up on that woman. Person after person lined up and talked about autistic children that need services, therapies that are being cut, can't get in-home care because of rates being reduced, providers leaving networks, and physicians not taking patients. That's not American, and that's not Idahoan. We deserve better. And if we could restore some of this revenue, the things I would do with it. If I could think even about the $450 million that we cut last year, I would think about the number of memory care services we would provide in rural Idaho. There are people with dementia and Alzheimer's and veterans that are homeless because they can't get the services they need. Assisted livings that are rejecting people because the Medicaid rate is so low. I helped personally a veteran this fall who was homeless. A social worker tracked him down because he fell and hit his head and landed in the hospital. She was watching for him. And we finally found services for him in an assisted living, but it wasn't easy because the rates were so low we couldn't find somebody to take him. And that's the exact same person we should be helping. A man in his 80s who served his country and doesn't have a home. This legislature is failing, and it's failing the people. And I hope you hear me today, everyone that's listening, you deserve better. And I want you to go to the polls and think about the people you're electing, because we don't have to cut everything to the bone. This is America. We're the richest country in the world. There is is enough. I'm tired of hearing cut, 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 and live within your means. Well, it'd be okay, I live within my means if you wouldn't stop lowering the means. That's basically telling me to live a crappier life. So today, I want you to think about the everyday working people, your neighbors, your family, the people you go to church with that need the services that we have as a government, and you're relying on us to provide. You hear it in my voice. We've got to do better, and I hope that we will. And we have some answers, and we'd like to be heard, and we'd like to turn this mess around. Thank you.
We're happy to do, if anyone has any questions or individual interviews afterwards.
Any questions?
Not all at once, not all at
Yeah.
once now.
Right.
Rainy day funds are kind of a one-time fix. Sweet real estate proposing, is there anything more forward-looking that sort of addresses the revenue problem in years to come?
Well, let me just mention on the rainy day funds, they are one-time monies, but they're designed to prevent legislatures like ours from creating budgets in a panic. And right now, we are creating budgets in a panic because we don't have enough money, and the solution is cut, cut, cut. By using those one-time monies, we could give ourselves some breathing space while we come up with more thoughtful solutions. And as you heard from economists who presented to the legislature, our economy is good. We need time for those revenues to come back. We can refill the coffers, and we can start funding our budgets.
May I add something to that? And one thing to remember, we have a cap on those rainy day funds, but we currently have about 50 million more sitting there. We could sweep that 50 million right now. We also know that our revenues were up in this month, so we're up about 112 million. We can grow out of this. We just need some time to do, and we need to do surgical cuts, not across the board with a chainsaw.
And many of our solutions are directed toward longer-term restoration of revenue and kind of restoring that longer-term fiscal health.
In terms of your proposals, are any of the committee chairs open to introductory hearings, or sort of where do we stand on, I guess it would take legislation to tap into the rainy day fund. We talked about pausing the implementation of House Bill 40. Are any committee chairs expressing interest in holding a print hearing?
Yeah, well, some of them we already ran the traps and tried to get hearings and were rejected, and they are currently personal bills. So, for example, Representative Birch's bill to pause the implementation of House Bill 40 has been run. It has a bill number. It's a personal bill because the chair refused to hear it. Same with Representative Gannon's bill on a more targeted and limited approach to conformity. It's what bill, House 616 now?
605.
605, sorry, yes. It's now a personal bill because it was declined to be heard. I have a couple bills right now that I have run by the tax committee chair. He's told me it's very, very unlikely he'll hear them, but I'm not going to pull the trigger on a personal bill until I get the official firm no, but it's probably going to be a no. Janie, do you want to talk about tapping rainy day funds and the procedure for that?
Well, I mean, JFAC can do that. I mean, we have control of the budget. It's been done in the past. It's not unheard of. There's certainly lots of precedent to do it. I keep hearing, well, it's not really raining. It's not a real crisis. We're not in a recession. Well, it is raining. We seeded the clouds and it's raining. It's self-inflicted, but we owe it to our constituents to do the right thing for our kids. These cuts, it will take years to recover from them. It's not one and done. Our universities, they can't build out in-demand careers. We have Micron that needs engineers, but we can't build out the engineering program at the U of I because we have cut $25 million from the four four-year institutions. That problem isn't going to be resolved in 1 year. It's going to be long-term, and so our kids will be waiting. Micron will hire somebody from out of state, or our kids will have to go out of state, pay more tuition to get that engineering degree. this is going to have an economic impact on not only our families, but on the state. Businesses need these in-demand careers. They need the nurses. We all need them. ISU can't build out that program.
And I would say for these individuals, for some of these individuals, it can never be fixed. An 8-year-old with autism who is being denied the therapy they need to develop will never have an opportunity to be 8 years old again. A high school kid who will not be able to take AP physics because the legislature defunded the Digital Learning Academy, they will never have a chance to redo their junior year in high school. The people who are now dead because we ended mental health care services, I'm sure you saw that coverage, they don't get their life back. They don't get a do-over. These services, for the people who are losing it in this critical window, we can never make it up to them.
But, and, it takes a legislature to care about those people to do something about it. But I did one on the bill I had. It was House Bill 598, and it was a personal bill because it wouldn't be introduced. I want to be clear. It's a potential pause. It gives an option. It doesn't. But I've had people tell me, "Oh, you do that, you're raising taxes." Well, let's just refresh here, okay? That tax bill, that tax cut bill, if you're making $100,000 or less, you're going to get maybe somewhere from 26 to 120 some odd dollars, maybe enough to buy a couple of tanks of gas, okay? But if you're the top 1%, you're getting a $20,000 tax break, okay? So this is just simply giving prudent, conservative people the option to look at other ways to make sure we have resources available to us if, in fact, we're heading into a recession and other economic situations beyond our control. So it's a potential. It's not an actual tax cut or repeal. It's not a repeal at all. It just provides an option.
Looks like Kevin had a question, but we lost him. Yes.
So you keep saying that bills that you brought up and were proposed didn't even get the light of day or chance. Are there any coalitions forming outside of the committee chairs there to find some sort of middle ground so you can at least get something from it?
Some of our colleagues from the other side of the aisle would like to have some of these options heard. I don't know that we have the numbers yet, but there's certainly some movement by our colleagues to, hey, these cuts are too drastic, and let's see if we can find another way.
We have gotten a lot of quiet support from colleagues across the aisle, but their sense as well. Leadership would never let this happen, and I think they fear retribution if they were to publicly come out and support.
JFAC's voting tomorrow to take a 2% of maintenance on us. Are your ideas here too late?
I think that ship has sailed. I think the committee has been gerrymandered to get these so-called maintenance budgets through. They're not maintenance budgets. They're turning off the lights in some areas. They're just not maintenance budgets, but I think that ship has sailed. We'll certainly do what we can and we have colleagues on the other side of the aisle that are going to help us. We're going to do what we can to stop them, but I think we're going to have to do it on the floor. I think on the House floor and the Senate floor.
And I would add to that, the ship has not sailed really because it has to pass through the floor. And if people's phones ring off the hook from their constituents and everybody says, hey, we want our roads paved, we want police, we want special ed, we want schools funded, we want our kids to be able to go to college, people can reverse course pretty quickly in this building if they see public outcry against it. So we can, I don't know if we'll be able to stop it in JFAC, but I think it can be stopped on the floor with enough public outcry on the revocation of the vital services on which they depend.
And we're hearing that. So, but I think JFAC's vote is probably in the bank already, but I'm hoping that the House and the Senate will do what they know is right.
All right, well, thank you all so much. I know we have some legislators that would be happy to do individual interviews. And thank you for joining us.